Have you ever seen a dog wait in the same place every single day and wondered, who or what is it waiting for? Would you stop to ask why? Would you even notice? It would simply lift its head slowly when someone passed, watch them with soft, almost pleading eyes, then lower its head back onto its paws. It never begged for food. It never followed anyone away. And it never left the doorstep. Sometimes it would lift its head to look at her, then return to its silent vigil. She asked the old man at the corner shop about it. "Ah," he said, his voice heavy, "that dog's been there longer than you've been in this town. Used to belong to someone in that house, I think. No one knows for sure. No one lives there," they said. "It's been empty for years." But then an elderly woman across the street revealed more. "There was a man who lived there," she said softly. "He had a dog, a German Shepherd. They were inseparable. But one winter, he never came back. Some say he went to a hospital and didn't make it. But the dog didn't know. It just stayed. It's been waiting ever since." Clara felt tears sting her eyes as she looked back at the porch. "So it's been waiting for someone who will never return," she thought. But still, the dog waited. It doesn't leave. Not for anything. Clara couldn't stop thinking about it. Clara came home and saw the dog sitting upright, ears alert, its eyes brighter than she'd ever seen them. It was staring at the end of the street. A car was slowly approaching, a car no one had seen in years. The dog stood, trembling slightly, as if sensing something it had longed for all this time. Clara froze, her heart pounding. Who was in that car? And would it finally open the door the dog had been waiting for? At night she'd look out her window and see the faint outline of the dog still curled on the porch under the flickering porch light. Rain would come, soaking the streets, but the dog didn't move. Snow blanketed the ground, but the dog remained. It didn't run. It didn't hide. It simply waited, through snowstorms. It curled itself tighter against the cold when she approached. The dog slowly raised its head but didn't growl or back away. How, in the early mornings, it would sit upright and stare at the horizon, waiting, before lying back down as if realizing today wasn't the day either. The world moved, but for the German Shepherd, time didn't matter, only loyalty did. For 2 whole years, it never missed a single day. It endured hunger, loneliness, the indifference of people passing by. Yet it didn't leave. Because in its heart, it believed the door would open. It believed that the person it was waiting for would return. She began to feel an ache in her chest every time she saw it. She even thought about taking it home. But when she tried coaxing it away with a leash, the dog refused to budge. It stayed frozen on the porch, eyes fixed on the door. Its eyes were tired, yet calm, like it didn't care about anything except that door. Clara whispered gently, "You don't have to stay here, you know." But the dog turned back toward the door and lowered its head again, as if to say, "I can't leave." Not yet. She placed the blanket near it anyway. The next morning, she saw that the food had been eaten. But the dog was still in the same spot, still facing the closed door. Through the heavy rains of spring, it sat soaked but still, staring quietly at the wooden door like it knew someone was behind it. Kids on their way to school would sometimes stop and whisper, "Why is it still here? Does it live there?" But no one really knew. Some said it belonged to an old man who used to live in that house but passed away years ago. Others said it was abandoned by someone who promised to come back. But promises don't mean much to humans after a while. To dogs, they mean everything. On a quiet street lined with old houses and maple trees that shed their leaves in slow golden waves each autumn, there was a single house with a porch that never seemed to change. In the blazing summer, its fur clumped from heat. In the freezing winter, frost clung to its whiskers. Sometimes kind-hearted strangers would leave scraps of food near the porch, and the dog would eat just enough to stay alive, but it never wagged its tail, never looked happy. It wasn't living, not really. It was waiting for a door that never opened. One evening, a young woman named Clara moved into the house next door. She was new to the neighborhood, didn't know the quiet stories that people stopped telling after a while. She noticed the dog the very first night when she came home late from work. There it was, lying on the porch, completely still, its eyes reflecting the dim street light. She felt a pang of sadness but assumed it belonged to someone nearby. "Poor thing," she whispered as she unlocked her door. Its wooden door, faded from years of sun and rain, stayed shut almost all the time. And right there, on the same cracked doormat, a German Shepherd slept day after day, week after week, through rain, snow, and scorching summer heat. People who walked by in the early mornings would sometimes glance at it, shake their heads, and keep moving. The mailman, who saw it every day for 2 years, said it was like a living statue. "That dog doesn't move," he told the neighbors. "It's like it's waiting for something it can't explain." The dog wasn't aggressive. It didn't bark, didn't chase anyone. As the seasons changed, the neighborhood changed too. New families moved in. Old ones moved out, but the German Shepherd stayed. But days passed, then weeks. And every time she came or went, the dog was still there. One winter night, Clara decided to leave a blanket and a bowl of warm food near the porch. Days turned into months, and Clara began to notice subtle things, how the dog would sometimes perk up its ears at the faint sound of a car approaching, only to lower its head again when the car passed without stopping. Meanwhile, life went on around it. Children played on the street. Holidays came and went. Clara's curiosity turned into obsession. She started asking more neighbors about the house. And then, one late afternoon, something happened. But that is where the story truly begins. Have you ever felt that strange rush when something long forgotten suddenly returns? That's what Clara felt as she watched the car approach, its tires crunching slowly over the gravel-lined street. The German Shepherd was no longer lying still on the doormat. It was standing now, body tense, ears pointed forward, tail stiff. But there was something in its posture, something hopeful, like a memory waking up. It never believed the man was gone. It held on to hope with a loyalty no human could ever match. Clara lingered near the doorway, unsure if she should follow. But the man gestured weakly. "Come in," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Because the man was old now, frail, and though the dog's loyalty had brought them back together, Clara knew he couldn't care for it the way he once did. And so, a choice had to be made, a choice that would shape the dog's future once more. Inside, the house was quiet, dusty, frozen in time. Photographs still hung on the walls, pictures of the man in his younger days, standing proudly with the same German Shepherd as a puppy. There were medals on a shelf, certificates of service, memories of a life once vibrant. The man lowered himself into a chair, the dog sitting at his feet like it had never left. He reached for a faded photograph on the table and showed it to Clara. "She was just a pup when I found her," he said softly. "I named her Hope, because she gave me a reason to keep going. After my wife passed, it was just us. And then, one night, I collapsed. My neighbor called an ambulance. I thought someone would take care of her while I was gone. But no one did. I thought she'd move on." Clara watched as the man tried to stand, but his legs wobbled from the long journey. Clara knelt down beside it, stroking its fur. "She never stopped waiting for you," she whispered. The man smiled through his tears. "Dogs, they love in a way we'll never truly understand." The dog lifted its head and pressed it gently against his chest, closing its eyes in peace for the first time in 2 years. The dog stayed right beside him, steadying him as if understanding he was fragile now. He placed a trembling hand on the door he hadn't opened in 2 years. Clara could feel the weight of that moment, the years of silence and waiting all pressing into a single breath. Slowly, he turned the key he still carried on his cane. The lock clicked, the door creaked, and for the first time in 2 years, the house opened. Clara stayed frozen on her own porch, unable to move her eyes away. The car was old, a faded blue sedan. Coated in dust but still running, it rolled to a gentle stop in front of the very house the dog had guarded for years. For the first time in 2 years, the dog let out a soft, trembling whimper, a sound Clara had never heard from it before. It was almost as if it recognized the engine, the scent, the feeling of who was inside. The door of the car opened slowly, and out stepped a thin elderly man with graying hair, his face drawn from years of life's hardships. He paused, gripping the car door for support, his eyes scanning the porch, and then he froze. The German Shepherd took one tentative step forward. Then another. Its breathing quickened, its tail began to move ever so slightly. And then, with a sound so right almost made Clara's knees buckle, the dog let out a cry, half a bark, half a wail, and bounded toward the man. The old man's hand went to his mouth as if to hold back a sob. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It can't be. It's really you." The dog stopped just inches from him, hesitated, then pressed its entire body against his legs, nuzzling him with such desperation that the man finally dropped to his knees and wrapped his frail arms around it. And right there, on the side of that quiet street, time stopped. Clara saw the dog trembling with joy, licking the man's hands and face, circling him, whining as if trying to make up for every second of the 2 years it had waited. Clara stepped closer, her heart pounding. Is she yours?" she asked softly, not wanting to break the moment. The man nodded slowly, tears streaming down his weathered face. "She's mine. She's always been mine." He looked at the dog, his voice cracking. "I had to leave. I didn't want to. But I had no choice. They took me to the hospital after the accident. I was in recovery for months. Then the pandemic hit. I couldn't come back. I thought she wouldn't still be here." He buried his face into the dog's fur. "I thought I lost you forever." The German Shepherd whined softly, as if to say, "I never left." Clara's eyes welled up. She thought about all those nights the dog had endured, the cold rain, the heavy snow, the loneliness. It never gave up. The man stepped inside, followed closely by the German Shepherd. But the dog hadn't moved on. It had waited every day, right where he'd left it, believing he would return. But the story wasn't over yet. If you had the chance to change the rest of a dog's life after it gave everything it had for love, would you do it? That question echoed in Clara's mind for days after witnessing the reunion. The old man, his name was Walter, had been kind and strong once, but time and illness had left him fragile. They posted it online with a simple caption: "She waited 2 years for her best friend to come home." By the next day, the story spread like wildfire. People began stopping by, leaving treats, blankets, and letters. People brought candles, flowers, and even toys for the dog. Walter, though weak, managed to step outside with Clara's help. He sat on the porch with the dog curled by his feet as neighbors shared what the story meant to them. "She reminded us what loyalty really is," one person said. Another added, "She showed us what love looks like when it doesn't give up." Walter smiled, looking down at the dog that had never left him. "She saved me," he said quietly. "I thought I had no one left in this world, but she never let me believe that." Strangers from across the country sent messages asking how they could help. The question was, when the final goodbye came, would the dog accept it? Or would it wait again, holding on to the hope that never dies in a loyal heart? A local vet volunteered to give the dog a full checkup for free. Kids from the nearby school came with flowers and drawings, calling the dog the bravest soul in town for the first time in years. Walter's quiet street was filled with life. Clara watched with amazement as the town rallied around them, inspired by a dog's unwavering loyalty. Walter sat in his old rocking chair, tears in his eyes as he saw people he didn't even know show kindness because of the dog. He told her more over tea that evening as the German Shepherd lay peacefully at his feet, finally relaxed, finally home. Some mornings, he struggled to breathe, his voice faint, his movements slower. The dog lifted its head at his voice, pressing closer to him as if it sensed what was coming. That night, Clara stayed late. Walter told her stories of the fires he'd fought, the lives he'd saved, and how the German Shepherd, his hope, had been by his side through it all. The room was filled with quiet warmth, the kind that only exists in moments you know you'll never forget. But in the back of Clara's mind, there was a soft ache, and knowing that soon, the door the dog had waited for would open for the last time. And each time, the German Shepherd stayed closer to him, resting its head on his knee, refusing to leave his side for even a second. It was as if the dog understood time was running out. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Walter looked at Clara and said softly, "She needs someone strong now. Someone who can give her what I no longer can. His eyes filled with both love and sadness. I can't ask, but I hope you'll consider it. Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had grown attached to the dog in these weeks, but she knew this wasn't about her feelings. It was about honoring what the dog had given to years of pure, selfless devotion. I'll take care of her, Clara whispered. I promise. Walter had been a retired firefighter who'd saved countless lives. After losing his wife, the dog had been his last family, his one constant companion. When the heart attack struck, he had no time to leave a note, no time to prepare. And when he woke up in the sterile walls of a hospital room, weeks had already passed. By the time he recovered enough to leave, the house was locked, neighbors had moved away, and everything felt lost. He assumed the dog wouldn't have survived. But the German Shepherd had never stopped waiting. It had kept a silent vigil at the door, believing every single day that the man it loved would come back. Clara couldn't stop thinking about what that meant. 2 years. 730 days. Through blistering summers and freezing winters, storms and silence, the dog endured everything because it believed. And now that Walter was finally back, the joy was overwhelming but fleeting. He could barely walk without support. His hands trembled as he tried to feed the dog. Clara could see it in his eyes. He was grateful beyond words, but he knew he didn't have much time left. That night, she sat on her porch, staring at the quiet street, and made a decision. The next morning, she returned with bags of groceries and fresh dog food. Walter tried to protest, but Clara smiled gently. She waited for you all this time. You both deserve to have these days in peace. She helped clean the house, replaced the torn blanket on the porch, and made sure the dog was healthy. For the first time, the German Shepherd wagged its tail fully, curling up between Walter and Clara like it finally believed it was safe. But news travels fast in small towns. A neighbor took a photo of the dog and Walter sitting together on the porch, but Clara noticed something else. Walter's health was declining faster than he admitted. Walter smiled faintly. Thank you. The following week, the town decided to hold a small gathering to honor the bond between Walter and the German Shepherd. But deep down, Clara knew this moment wouldn't last forever, and soon, the choice she had promised to make would come. If love could hold someone here forever, do you think anyone would ever leave? That thought lingered in Clara's mind in the days that followed the gathering. The street had grown livelier, full of neighbors who now stopped to greet Walter and the German Shepherd, to bring fresh food and warm blankets. But beneath the kindness, Clara could see the truth. Walter was fading. They built a small garden near Walter's house, with a plaque that read, "For Walter and his faithful friend, a love that waited." Instead, it followed Clara everywhere, guarding her with the same quiet loyalty it had given Walter. It greeted the neighbors, played with the children, and even began wagging its tail freely. Clara realized something profound, that loyalty like this doesn't disappear when someone is gone. It simply finds a new place to bloom. The dog wasn't replacing Walter, it was carrying him forward, showing everyone that love like theirs doesn't die. It transforms, it heals. People came to visit, bringing their own dogs, sitting quietly on the bench beside the plaque, and reflecting on the kind of love that never asks for anything in return. It became a story of second chances, how even after loss, love can find a new beginning. Clara kept her promise. She gave the dog the rest of its life filled with warmth, kindness, and a family it didn't have to wait for anymore. And every time she walked past Walter's old porch, the dog would pause for a moment, look at the door it had waited for, and then quietly move on, side by side with her, into a future it could finally trust. Children would place flowers on the porch where the dog had once waited, learning what true devotion meant before they even understood the word. And Clara, every evening, would sit with the German Shepherd in the garden, telling it stories about Walter. It would listen quietly, its eyes soft, like it was keeping his memory alive. His steps grew smaller each day. His breaths became slower, like a clock winding down. Yet even in his weakness, there was a quiet peace about him, as though the reunion had given him closure he never thought he'd have. Each evening, Clara would see him on the porch with the German Shepherd pressed against his legs, the two of them gazing at the sunset in silence. Sometimes he would whisper things to the dog that no one else could hear, words only meant for them. And every time, the dog would lift its head and listen as if understanding every single syllable. One cold morning, Clara found Walter sitting in his chair by the window, his hand resting gently on the dog's back. His eyes were closed, his breathing soft. For a moment, she thought he was asleep, but whose story, because of his dog, touched them deeply. At the service, Clara spoke. Walter taught us that even in silence, even in absence, love can remain. And this dog showed us what it means to never give up on someone. The German Shepherd sat calmly at her side, dignified, as if it understood it was saying goodbye. After the memorial, Clara brought the dog home with her. At first, it was hesitant, always glancing back at Walter's porch as if expecting him to return. It slept by her door, the way it had for years, waiting. But slowly, with gentle words and steady care, Clara showed it that there was still life ahead. She took it on walks through the fields Walter once loved, fed it warm meals, and gave it a soft bed near her fireplace. Day by day, the dog began to trust again, its tail wagging a little more each morning. But as she stepped closer, she realized his chest no longer rose. He had passed quietly in the night, leaving behind the home he loved and the loyal companion who had never given up on him. Clara's heart ached as she looked at the German Shepherd, who sat completely still, staring at Walter's face. It didn't cry, it didn't move, it simply stayed beside him for hours, silent, like it knew this was the final moment it had waited for all along. Clara knelt beside them, her tears falling softly. "He loved you so much," she whispered. The dog lowered its head onto Walter's lap one last time, before slowly stepping back. The news spread quickly. Neighbors brought flowers and cards. The small town held a quiet memorial for Walter, a man many had never known personally, but the story didn't end there. Inspired by the loyalty of one dog, the town decided to create something lasting. In time, the dog began to change. It no longer sat at the door expecting someone who would never return. And so the story of the German Shepherd who slept outside the same house for 2 years didn't end in sadness, because some doors may close forever, but some hearts never stop opening.